Today is the day of our annual Metcalf series. The Metcalf Symposium is an annual event that brings in a speaker from outside MUS to help students reflect on some of the great ethical traditions of Western civilization, all consistent with the school's Christian tradition. The Metcalf Symposium was an idea that was generated by Mr. Clay Smythe even before he came to MUS, along with fellow alumnus Mr. Bubba Halliday. They have since financially supported the Metcalf Symposium and continue to bring in outstanding speakers once a year. Today is certainly no exception to that. You know, several thousand years ago, as the Bible tells us, God asked Cain, "Where's your brother? Where's Abel?" Of course, Cain had killed him. Cain's answer still, I think, resonates with generations today, because Cain's answer to the question, "Where's your brother?" was, "Am I my brother's keeper?" He didn't mean it rhetorically. I think today, certainly, we would say, yes, we are our brother's keeper. Mr. Smythe will introduce today's guest.
We have some folks absent today, and if anybody wants to scoot up, that'd be appropriate, or if you want to nap where you are, understand. But I appreciate everybody coming out today in MUS, allowing the Metcalf Symposium. Brian Cress comes to us from Seattle, Washington. And Brian, you've been in Memphis for a couple of days. We appreciate that. We brought some Seahawks out for you. He's a big Seahawk guy. So there you go. Yeah, you like that? Yeah. There you go. See. He's been in Memphis since Wednesday. He was at Rhodes College, and yesterday he toured all the sites and went to the Civil Rights Museum, and is very aware of the idea of justice and injustice, as we know well in this city through a lot of the troubles that have befallen the American South. And an interesting thing that Brian spoke to us about was instead of really a definition of justice, it was a definition of injustice. And injustice simply is the abuse of power by those in power. And it made me think of the MUS mission statement and the cultivation of service and leadership, and the expectation that you, many of you, most of us, will be in positions where we will have some influence. And with that influence comes the obligation and the responsibility to have the right use, the good use of whatever power it is that we have, be it employers, fathers, good co-workers, civic leaders. And the right use of power, maybe we could take that for granted. In the world, there are 4 billion people that are on the bad side of the abuse of power. International slavery, child trafficking, indentured servitude. It's alive and well. And what Mr. Cress is going to bring to us today is a wealth of experience. He's graduated his 3 children already out of high school. And I enjoyed the fact he got to walk backstage yesterday, because his father was a shop teacher in high school. And Mr. Cress himself is a bit of an architect, and he enjoyed seeing all the props and things that were backstage. And I think he understands a lot of your world here as students. He spends most of his time speaking. He's the director of youth development for across the country with the International Justice Mission. Based out of Washington, D.C., he's based out of Washington State, and he's a Seahawk. Welcome to Memphis, Brian Cress.
Well, thank you. You talked about them napping. Let's hope nobody naps this morning. That section right there. You'll notice the title that I've given to this is Modern Day Slavery, What Can You Do? And you can actually read that a couple different ways. You looking on, well, what can you do? You know, huge problem, what can you do? Or as I think you will see today, it's more going to be like, what can you do? What can you do? So in my role at International Justice Mission, also called IJM, I get to help students across the country become aware of this problem called modern-day slavery. And to give you a little glimpse of what our organization is like, I want to first show you, it's about a 2-minute video clip about IJM.
NBC News In Depth tonight, a rare glimpse into a world both horrible and heartbreaking. Here is some of what NBC's Chris Hansen has uncovered in a Dateline NBC investigation.
Poverty is no excuse for forcing children into prostitution, says Gary Haugen, who runs a U.S.-based human rights group, International Justice Mission.
The International Justice Mission.
The International Justice Mission.
International Justice Mission.
International Justice Mission.
The thing that keeps them there is violence, is terror. We will kill you, we will beat you. The actual leverage impact of rule of law is miraculous. All you need to do is establish a credible deterrent, and the people who once were slave masters decide they need to get out of that business.
What do the papers mean? Freedom.
Oh, you doing over here? Bill 30 and 2 girls?
God knows what their future would have been. That's what we're all about. That's the impact that we are having by rescuing children out of those dark, evil places and seeing them mature and grow, be educated and be free.
Why should we do anything? Well, apart from it being horrific, what is happening, as a man of faith, I turn to the ancient scriptures and I read in Isaiah 1:17, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, plead for the widow. And the reality is, I think no matter what your faith background might be, you can agree with these words. This should be motivation for us to make a difference or to want to make a difference. But first of all, what are some of the facts? What are the plain, hard facts about modern-day slavery, which human trafficking, the sex trafficking component, is a part of? The first fact is that we are told by experts that in our world today, there are 29.8 million, nearly 30 million slaves today. That is more slaves today than during the 400 years of the transatlantic slave trade. That's pretty hard to believe. Now, these aren't metaphorical slaves. These are real people who are enslaved right now. In the industry of sex trafficking, we're told that there will be 2 million children pulled into the sex trafficking industry this year. Basically, rape for profit. In India alone, the number of women and girls held in prostitution, staggering 2.3 million. The United Nations tells us 1 in 3 women around the world will experience some type of abuse in their lifetime. So, what do we do? What does IJM as an organization do? Well, we rescue. We have undercover investigators that every night and every day are searching out the brothels, those clubs that have prostitution taking place, those karaoke bars that are fronts for sex trafficking. We have investigators who are investigating, looking for the children who are victims of sex trafficking. We have investigators who are investigating the brick factories and the rice mills and the rock quarries throughout India that are filled with slaves doing that work. Men, women, children who daily make bricks, roll beady cigarettes, rake rice paddies, all for no or very little pay, in which they actually then have to pay back to their slave owners to buy their own food for debts that they will never be able to resolve. Second thing we do is we provide victim aftercare. So what do you do when you rescue a young girl, 12 or 13 years old, from a brothel? Well, you have to provide some kind of aftercare. Aftercare is where we're able to place her in homes where she receives protection, she receives medical care. Many of the girls that we rescue, I would say most of them are addicted to drugs, because that's how the brothel owners help keep control of their girls. We need to provide them with education and job training, and we do that until at least they are 18 years old. Many beyond that. The third thing we do is perpetrator accountability. Basically, we want the bad guys to be held accountable for their actions. So we have lawyers who go to court to bring the cases that we have investigated and the cases where we have rescued, and we want to shut down those clubs, those brothels, those brick factories where the slave owners have been making millions off the back of their slaves. And the fourth thing we do, we call it structural transformation. This is where we work with the local authorities to actually help them succeed at what they're doing. We want to help fix the broken justice system that's causing these things or allowing these horrific things to take place. It's a little bit like this. If you were out on the Mississippi River in your canoe, paddling around with your friends, and you're having a grand old time, and you're having water fights and everything, and you see somebody floating down the river drowning, what do? You immediately paddle over to them, and you rescue them, and you pull them into your canoe, and you paddle to shore, and you have somebody there to help provide care for them. The next day you're out there canoeing around again, and somebody else is floating down the river drowning. So you paddle over to them, and you rescue them into your boat, and you paddle over to shore, and you get them some aftercare. And this happens day after day after day. And then one day, you have this brilliant idea. Why don't we paddle upstream, paddle up this river to see who is throwing these people in the river to begin with? Maybe we can rescue them before it even happens. And that is what structural transformation is. That is where you begin to see a community change, when people begin to hold accountable those who are committing crimes. So how does this really live out? I'll tell you about a 24-hour experience that I had in the Philippines. We have 20 offices around the world, and 3 of the offices are in the Philippines. One is in Manila, one is in a city called Cebu, and another city called Pampanga. And I arrived at the Cebu office after like a 20-hour flight and connecting through Japan, and you get there and you're exhausted and you're tired and you're upside down. It's 12 o'clock in the day, but it's really 12 o'clock at night. But I remember getting into the office, and I was kind of running on adrenaline and meeting the staff there. And the head of our aftercare team, this woman, comes up to me and she says, "Hey, Brian, I am going to one of our aftercare homes. Would you like to go with me and meet some of the clients that we have rescued in a raid that we did 2 months ago?" And I was like, absolutely, I want to go. So I go with her, and we arrive at this kind of a compound. It's a school. The girls live there. They go to school there. They have all their health care and job training and everything there. It actually has about 500 girls at this school. So it's a compound similar to your campus. It has a high wall all the way around it so that perpetrators and bad guys can't get in. And I remember going and sitting in a classroom with these 24 girls and them talking to me. They were learning English and through an interpreter, and they were just a bunch of teenage girls. Like probably some of the friends that you have in your youth groups or your neighborhoods or your sisters or whatever. And you want to know what those girls wanted to know? They wanted to know, what was it like to be a high schooler in the United States? What do high schoolers like to eat there? What kind of music do they like to listen to? They actually wanted to know if I knew Justin Bieber. It's like, no, I don't know Justin Bieber. They were typical teenage girls who 2 months prior had been sexually abused 10 times a day, 7 days a week, never allowed to leave the brothel, the club that they were a part of. As I left that aftercare home, a word came to my mind, and the word was hope. There is hope. These girls who had been horrifically abused are now being healed, and there was great hope. And I remember going back to the office with the aftercare staff, and it was just like, wow, the first 3 or 4 hours that I'm here, I get to see something incredible. And we go out to dinner that night with the team, and I was sitting at dinner next to our head of investigations. And he leans over to me and says, "Hey, Brian, so we've been investigating this high-end club, and we need somebody who looks like a rich American businessman to go undercover with us. You kind of look like you could be a rich American businessman." And all of a sudden my heart starts beating like crazy. He's wanting me to go undercover. Now you got to realize I've worked at IJM for about 7 years, and I've always wanted to go on a raid. I wanted to bust down the doors of a brothel. I want to rescue some girls, and I want to beat up some bad guys, okay? But then all of a sudden, whenever I've asked to do that, they've always said to me, "Actually, no, Brian, we take professionals to do undercover work. We don't take guys like you." But here I am sitting, and they're asking me, would I do this? So they gave me a briefing on what the whole situation would be like. I go with our investigator. I have no identification on me, no watch, no wallet, no ring. I'm posing as a rich American businessman who's going to bring lots of American clients. We get comped into this club. They want to put us at the best tables. They want to give us the best food and drink. And then we go into the back hallway, and there's this hallway that's about as long as the stage here. And it's just a hallway, but there is a window about 1 foot tall that runs the full length. And there's a whole bunch of men standing, peering through that window. And what you do is you look through that window, and what you see on the other side was about 100 girls, very scantily clad. All of those girls there have a blue button. And on that button is the number. And that is so that the men can choose who they want to come out to the club with them. And I remember our investigator who's with me, because we're looking for minors, he picks number 44. That's the girl that is going to come and sit with me. He has a girl that comes and sits with him. We're sitting together. These girls are very hungry. It's obvious they haven't eaten. They appear to be young to me. They don't try to get us to go into the back rooms. They have these VIP back rooms. So it gives us evidence that that's probably, they're young, they're not wanting to do that. She goes into the bathroom because she wants to write down her email address because she wants to become my Facebook friend. She's reaching out. And she comes back, she says, oh, there are too many people in there, I couldn't do it there. So she actually writes her email address on my hand so that I can get out of there with a shred of evidence of who she is. I remember going back to my hotel that night, wishing I could have just rescued her then, but I couldn't do that because we're gathering intelligence to be able to take this case to court. And I didn't sleep that night at all. And I remember going into our office the next day and debriefing with our team, and the sense of despair had come over me. It was like the girls I had seen during the afternoon had been rescued out of a place like this. And the despair overwhelmed me. And it was around lunchtime when our head of our legal team came up to me and said, hey, Brian, you know those girls that you met yesterday? We raided the club, the brothel that we raided and rescued them from. We have now completed all the legal paperwork necessary to actually go and close it down. Would you like to go? Absolutely. And so we hop in the vans and we drive, and we're parked about a block and a half away from this club, and it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I used to think, man, I thought raids happened at like 2 o'clock in the morning. At least on TV, that's when all the busts happen. And like, well, actually, no, we often do it during the day so that there's not as many people, and so a mob scene doesn't distract. And we sit in the van and we're waiting for the police to arrive, and we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. And we waited in that van for about 2 hours. And eventually a couple police vans pull up right in front, and out pile all these cops with machine guns, and whoa, these guys are like tough. And I remember hopping out of our van, and we go down there, and I have my little Nikon camera, and I'm like taking some pictures outside on the sidewalk, and this cop comes up to me with a machine gun. He says, are you with IJM? I said, yes, officer, I am. He goes, well, you can go inside. I remember walking inside, and I can't show you the pictures inside because it's all part of the ongoing case. But to see this place, which was not nice like the place I was the night before, at least the furniture and stuff. To see that back room that had the window, they call that the fish bowl. To see these VIP rooms and how disgusting they were. And to see that this is where those girls I had met were abused. And as we closed up, we boarded up the front of that building. We chained the doors, and we're able to place this sign that says that this establishment is permanently closed. No longer is abuse taking place here. And the word that came to my mind was justice. Justice has been served. Well, that brings me back to the opening question. Really, what can I do? What can you do? Not many of you are going to ever be able to go to the Philippines and have that kind of experience, and I was just kind of along for the ride. But really, what can we do? It's pretty overwhelming to think of those staggering numbers that I gave, all those millions of slaves and those trapped in sex trafficking, and what in the world can I do? This is another scripture from the Bible that hints to what you can begin to do. It says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in these 5 areas: speech, in life, in love, in faith, in purity. 5 things that you as young men can do to make a difference. So first, you can use your speech. What are the things that you are saying? What are you standing up for? When you see an injustice happening, are you saying something about it? If you're a junior or senior and you see somebody talking trash to a lower campus person, do you stand up? Do you not let that kind of abuse of power happen? What are you talking about? How are you using your voice? Maybe when you have an assignment that you have to prepare a speech or whatever, maybe do some research on modern day slavery and use your speech to raise awareness of what's going on in the world. How about your life? You all have gifts and skills and passions, hobbies. I have them too. How are you possibly using those to make a difference? I'll give you some examples in a second. You can actually use those gifts that you have now. You don't have to wait until you are grown up to make a difference. I've seen this school and heard about you guys, and I went on the web and read about you, and I walked backstage and I saw the stuff being built, and I see how you are involved in the leadership and leading of so many things in this campus. You can use your gifts and skills. You already are doing it. How do you use those to help end and raise awareness of modern day slavery? What about love? You know, some of you are really good at expressing emotion. Some of you are singers. Some of you are songwriters. Some of you are musicians. Some of you can write poetry. How do you use the expressions of your heart to raise awareness, to have passion, to end slavery? When I first heard about IJM and the work they were doing, my daughter was 12 years old, the same age as the girls that we were rescuing. All of a sudden, my love for my daughter and the emotion that I had for her was able to be channeled into my passion to help somebody else's daughter. What about faith? You can pray. You can get your youth groups, if you're involved in churches, you can get your youth groups to be involved in raising awareness about this problem, raising awareness of God's heart and passion. You can raise money. You can do all kinds of things. And then finally, purity. You know, it's pretty easy sometimes for us to sit here and to think about all those horrible, bad people on the other side of the world who are doing impure sexual things. But let me tell you, gentlemen, purity starts with you. It starts with your heart. How are you treating the women in your life? What are the images that you are allowing come into your brain? It's very easy in our society today to pursue impurity. But I want to challenge you to be men of purity. It starts with you. So, what are some other people doing? Here's some few examples. Maybe this will stir the pot for you to begin thinking, hey, maybe I could do something like that. Okay, there was a girl in Colorado. She was in the High School Musical, Beauty and the Beast. She was Belle. She really wanted to make a difference, so she was able to actually get the musical to, part of what they did was raise awareness and raise some funds for IJM and the work that we're doing. And in the movie Beauty and the Beast and the show, you know that the rose is an important piece. So she bought a whole bunch of these really cheap flashlight roses. And then they sold them for $10 a piece at the musical. And at the end of the musical, everybody turned on their rose and lit it up in solidarity towards helping those who needed to be rescued. They raised about $3,000 selling stupid little roses and raising awareness. There's a football team in Ohio. These guys love to lift weights. They decided, hey, what if we just actually take lifting weights, and they did a weight lift-a-thon. And they got people to sponsor them for how many pounds they could lift in an 8-hour period or something like that. It's like they were using what they already loved to do. How about soccer? There's a school in Virginia that the soccer team decided we're going to do a benefit soccer game. The varsity against alumni and the teachers. And people paid to come see this thing, and the teachers got all dressed up crazy, and so they just used what they love to do. I had a 9th grade boy say to me, I just love video games. What can I do? So he did a video game party at his house, and his mom bought all kinds of pizza, and right before they could actually eat, he showed a 10-minute video about IGM, and he simply wanted his friends to know, this injustice is important to me. He just used what he loved to do. How about some Taekwondo kids? These are up in Canada. They did a breaking brick demonstration at a mall. There's some snowboarders who love to snowboard. They decide, we're going to do a snowboard marathon to see how many times up and down the hill we can go in a ski day. There was a girl from California this past January. She decided a thing called Dressember. And so she wore a dress every single day in December and took an Instagram photo of it. And pretty soon other girls started doing this. And by the end of December, because of one girl's idea, she and about 2,000 other girls raised $160,000. Just because she liked to wear dresses. So another girl and her dad, they loved to ride bikes, and so they rode the Freedom Trail one summer. And they got people to sponsor them, and they raised funds. And then even crazy stuff, this group in Texas, they said, we're going to do a Volkswagen stuffing contest to break the Guinness Book of Records of how many you can stuff in there. And they simply turned it into a way to raise awareness about human trafficking. You see, all it takes is thinking, what are my gifts and passions and ideas? And maybe I can do something cool and creative too. My story. My story is that I love to run. And I talk to students all the time about doing something, and I thought, man, I love to run. Maybe I should do something. My hobby is running, so I started Brian's Run to End Slavery. Okay? I had a friend make this poster, and I put it up in Starbucks all over town, made a Facebook page, made an online giving page, sent it out to all my friends, did everything possible, and people could, if they donated, they could send me a song and I'd put it on my running playlist. And I've now done 3 half marathons and raised $25,000. All because I like to run? Is it because I'm so great and awesome? No. I just took what I love to do and decided I'm going to try to channel that for others to know about what's going on in this world. So what can you do? Here's some simple ways that if you want to follow us, at Facebook, International Justice Mission, you'll be able to hear about some of these rescues that I've shared about. IJM HQ Instagram, about once a week or twice a week, you'll be able to see people that we've rescued. You can get those things and you can say, hey, I'm actually going to pray for those people. Use your faith for that. If you want to follow us on Twitter, if you're a Twitter person, you can follow IJM, you can follow me. I love to tweet out the different things that I hear happening. In closing, let me say this. Something's coming up on April 9th that maybe you as a school want to consider. This would be something your ASB or your student council might want to consider. Or maybe this would be something that you would do with your youth group. Last year, we had a Stand for Freedom Day. It's one day for every other day. We had over 500 universities and high schools. They set aside a place on their campus where people would stand throughout the day, and they would make signs and they'd hold them up, and they raised awareness, and they collected loose change, and they helped rescue people. Maybe that's something you guys would want to consider. Maybe you want to learn more. We have a couple different tools that you could choose. One is the 24-hour justice experience. Is something that you could do at your youth group at your churches. If you're looking for something to help you discover in the Bible what it's all about, I wrote a devotional book called Seeking Justice. Ways for you to begin to continue to learn. I don't expect that you're going to leave this auditorium today all set to do something and change the world tomorrow. I didn't decide to run a half marathon on one day and run it the next. It took me a long time to train and plan and to make sure I was eating right. You need to do the same thing. You need to discover and follow the passions that God has given to you. You can join us. And this is a quote from our president, Gary Haugen, who you saw in that video clip. He says, "Nothing happens just because we are aware of modern slavery." You being aware this morning of modern slavery doesn't change a thing. But nothing will ever happen until we are aware. You are aware now of some of the problem. What is the little thing tickling in the back of your brain thinking, you know, maybe I could do something. Maybe I could make a difference in somebody else's life. Last Wednesday, I was in Washington, D.C., and I was sitting in our office, meeting with some of our team, and I got an email from one of my colleagues, and it said, right now, a raid is happening in the Philippines. I'm like, right now. Last Wednesday, whatever you were doing, we were rescuing 6 girls out of a brothel in the Philippines. On Monday, the beginning of this week, we rescued 36 men and women and children out of a slave operation, which is a logging operation in India. It's happening. You can be a part of it. I believe some of you will. So we've got a little bit of time left, just a minute or so, or two. If anybody has any drastic questions I can answer now. There is going to be some time for questions at, what's it called after this? There's kind of a, whatever that is called. Anybody have any questions off the top of their head right now that, yes, sir? Great. That's a great question. The question is, we have the same problem here in the United States. And the question was, what does our organization do in the United States? So we actually, in the United States, do not perform undercover investigations and rescue and aftercare for slavery and sex trafficking in the United States. And we do that for a couple of reasons. First, in the United States, we actually have a justice system that is working. We have a police system and sex trafficking task force that function at a very high level and are doing that already. What we do in the United States is raise awareness. We're a nonprofit organization, so we raise funds. We do government advocacy, where we're working with our government to help them enact laws and put pressure on other countries that are abusing human rights violations. So we have chosen to be an international human rights organization. So we only do our work. We have about 20 offices around the world where we do that. So we do have that problem, and I would encourage you to even look to see what's going on in Memphis. There are probably folks in Memphis who are wanting to help victims of trafficking that might be taking place here. Any other questions? Yeah. Right. Yeah, will we able, that's a great question. With 30 million in the world, are we going to ever be able to eliminate that problem? Ultimately, eliminate it? No, because this is a problem that deals with man's sinful nature, the choice to sin and do wrong. So we will never eradicate that. We do believe that we will begin to see some seismic shifts and changes happening. We've seen this in some communities that we have done work in, where, for instance, in the Philippines, we had a project in Cebu, where over a 5-year period, we saw a 79% reduction in the number of minors that were trafficked. So we do believe that that will begin to happen. As the justice systems in some of these countries begin to be fixed, and people of goodwill are in places of authority and not abusing the system, we'll begin to see some huge shifts. We're beginning to see some of that even in India now. as the movement against corruption in the government, the movement against the lower caste system, and people caring for them is beginning to happen. So it will take a lifetime. We believe it is your generation, really, that will be the generation that will see slavery eradicated. You know, we used to have slavery in the United States that was eradicated, and it took a long time for that to happen, and we believe that can happen around the world as too. I think I have maybe time for one more question. Way in the back. Yes, sir. If you raise money, how do you donate it to us? You would work through your school administrators on how you would want to do that. If you did it as a school, they probably have protocols for what is allowed and what you can do. If you were to just to do it on your own, let's say you're going to do something on your own out there, you can send checks to IJM, and checks is what, don't send cash. I mean, it's better to get your parents to write a check, or you can do it online. We actually have an online where you can create your own donation page where people can track it and join. Like my running thing, I had an online donation page that people could easily do it that way. So, but work it through your school administrators if you're going to do it through the school. I think that's my time. Who takes it from here?
Mr. Cress, thank you very much. The International Justice Mission doing some great work, following the moral imperative that every human being has worth and value and dignity because we're all made in the image of God. Faculty dismissed.